We want to create a community where Iowans can come together, just like us here today. Thank you for being here during your lunch hour. I appreciate it. We want to connect progressive minds and voices across the state together, which will, help us empower the work that's going on the ground already, with these organizers and individuals like yourselves. And here at Progress Iowa, we are here to provide toolkits, trainings, and resources to help bring that all together. So next slide. How did we get here? How are we here? Why are we here? Because we want to organize an in-person event to bring, awareness and information to the things that we care about. So if you can go to the next slide, Ivy. Recently, a lot of people are getting fired up with a lot of the horrible decisions coming out of the Supreme Court, or local legislature, or, the things that are coming up in the election, and we're getting fired up. So some folks recently just joined a Facebook group or a community group, and they're passionate. Some folks have been fired up and want to continue to take action. And some folks, they have ideas on how they want to get involved, but they don't really know how to make that happen. And that's why today will be a great way to get some tips and tricks and different opportunities to figure out how you can create these events that you see going on, and how you can get other people to be active. And so hosting an event is a great way to get people engaged, to get them bought in, and to get information spread, and awareness raised for what you guys all care about. And so also this is a great way if you're already involved and you host events, maybe tips and tricks that we hadn't thought about, or just a great way to jump in on the discussion at the end and, find out things that we can improve on, or just have questions about and answer that, and have a really good conversation towards the end about, why we're doing this, how we do it, and what we can do to get there, which this presentation will all cover as well. So next slide, we're going to be starting out. We need to know the purpose of this event. What is the driving force? Do you want legislation or policy changes? Do you want activism on a certain issue, and simply just to raise awareness? I have had community forums and a lot of meetings, and small events to get activism changes for tenant rights in my community. And our goal was to set out to get an ordinance change. And 2 years later, City Council unanimously passed an ordinance to that's way more rental friendly, and really against the bad actor landlords that are just trying to profit off of people and treating tenants like second-class citizens. And no longer will that happen because we got that ordinance passed. But it took a lot of community town halls, forums, and activism to get there. And so that's one way that it can work. It can be a driving force. Or, other goals. What else do you want to achieve? Do you want to do fundraising? Holding events that do fundraising can accomplish really good goals, especially if it's to great local causes. And how you want, what your purpose is can determine what your event will be. So again, fundraising at a rally, a combined event that might help. Should it be a march? Human rights, and many cities host voting rights march reenactments, and that's a different kind of event to reenact historical events, and make sure that we are paying tribute and accountability to those who have fought for a lot of what we need to do. And so that's one kind of an event. And there's forums, town halls, there's all different kinds of volunteers, etc. And so determining what's going to be the most appropriate to take action on these opportunities will be the most effective way as well. And so just key things: when it will be held, your target audience, where it will take place. Is this issue well known about already, or do you need to do more activism to raise awareness about it? And then, just again, where is it taking place? Indoor, outdoor, know your stuff. So there's a lot of questions, but guess what? There's more to think about. So we're going to go to our next slide. And, we just have so many questions. Are these similar events? So for example, Roe v. Wade, obviously there were tons of events throughout our state going on the same days, on different days, weekends apart, various sizes, various builds, all still important and all working with each other, because that's what needed to happen. They needed to have all of that amplification. But there are some events that one group should take the lead, because that's the group that has been combating and working on it, and needs to have that focus and amplification and the support for them, rather than taking, it away from that group. So determining what group you want to work with and what is happening in those areas is going to be very key. You have to think about your attendance size, and then will the place that you are thinking of to hold it be accommodating for that size. And then also with accessibility and accommodation, do you need interpreters? Do you need ASL interpreters or folks who speak a different language? Do you need a schedule to give folks, because it's a longer event and people could pop in or out at different times? Or if it's too long of a drive, is it not, can they not make it because it's a 15-minute event, but a 45-minute drive? So, having these things helps people determine if they're able to make it, and it makes it easier for you to get that information out there and have people build for it. We also need to know, like, are you going to partner with other groups? What expenses might you occur? You always have to, you're going to be providing probably, water, you might be printing off flyers, you might be, getting a sound system or a generator for speaker systems, etc. So those are costs. How are you going to pay for them? And then again, if it's private or public, do you need a permit or a reservation for a private or a public event? It can be even as small as a shelter house. Usually you do need a permit for as well. Even you just rent it out from your local city or park website. But that's an expense that some people don't think about to have. So that's why we want to go over this now. And then we're going to talk about how we firm up these events. So we have all of these ideas floating around, but then we actually need to take it into action. So we're going to go to the next slide and talk about that. So we have the date and time figured out. So put that on your calendar. If you use a Google Calendar, if you use a regular paper pen calendar, put it on there so you don't forget. Tell people to put it on their calendars who are helping you plan it, so they don't forget, and make sure that it is there and it is set in stone. And then make sure that, again, it's not conflicting with other events in that area. So that way you can have, an opportune time for people to show up to this event and support it. Again, firming up that location. Will you be sharing a space with others? Sometimes there are communal areas. I've held events at restaurants where other people are just having their regular lunch, but I'm having, a little forum or a volunteer meeting or whatever it might be. And we have to be respectful of everyone else's space. And so we need to make sure that you can figure that out. Is the location easy and accessible to get to? Does it have ADA accessibility as well? Can folks easily join that area? Is it outside and hard to find? Is it inside and hard to find? Do you, have to give directions or a map description of where to go? Like a lot of people, like caucus locations, for example, people need to know exactly where to go because there's a lot of different places in that event period. But if you're just in like a campaign office, for example, or like a organization's office where they only have one location, it's going to be a little more easy to find. So just making sure that people know that. And again, public or private space, will you need a permit? You just need to know where you're allowed to be so everyone, again, can be safe and have that. So outdoors, if we're doing something in the polar vortex, we really got to think about that. I used to be an electoral organizer, so having canvases where people were very prepared and knew what kind of weather it was going to be was very key ahead of time. Or in the summer, we want to make sure that people avoid heat stroke and are hydrated. And so you need to make sure that you have a contingency plan for extreme weather or just different, seasons if there's going to be an issue with that. And then, of course, you cannot have an event without volunteers and without help. It's very hard to do events just by yourself, and having help obviously makes the dream work. Teamwork makes the dream work. So what kind of assistance do you need? Who do you think is going to be able to help you? How many folks will you need it? And then are those tasks that you have on your plate clear and delegated, so you can start doing more or taking a little off your plate, so that way there's accountability amongst a lot of folks to make it come together rather than just one person. And if it's an event that a lot depends on me, I can get a little scramble brained, and I get a little worried about things. But when you have other people making it come together, it makes it so much easier for you to relax and focus on your one part and do that work. So we're going to go to the next part. You can't have an event without without getting some press to that too. You really want to amplify it. Having events usually is there for awareness. In most cases, volunteer events are the exception. You don't always need press at a volunteer event. Maybe you can, if a big canvas happens with like a stand-in uh, like congressperson, excuse me, or a legislator who's coming in to help, kick off that canvas, you might want some press there. But usually volunteer events are the exception for wanting press to your event. But the big thing is, how do you contact the press? Do you know if you're writing a press release or advisory and releasing that to the press? How do you get that press list? Do you have contacts to your local reporter, or are you friends with them? Do you know people who work for news stations or political news outlets? Do you have people that you would like to speak to the press, like a volunteer who can use your talking points and talk to them? So it's not just the organizer of the group speaking, and it's, constituents and community volunteers and leaders. And then have you shared talking points with people to prepare for that? A lot of questions going on there about the press, but don't worry, we are here to help you on that. Here at Progress Iowa, we are a communications hub, and so we are very happy to help write up press advisories, help the amplification of an event on Facebook or social media, making those social posts, and helping recruit people and amplify, sending emails out, etc. We also have contacts to local news sources. So we're happy to help amplify these things and help get press to your event, so that way you can get the coverage that you deserve and that is so needed to help amplify the things that you are working on that are, passionate and involved and advocacy work that's so important to be, involved in. And then without also a big key, our next slide will be safety. Safety is one of the most important things when you have an event. You want to make sure people feel secure and protected as well. So you want to think about what you need. If you have a really big event, like I'm going to go back to the example of the July 10 rally with Planned Parenthood and a bunch of co-sponsors like Progress Iowa and One Iowa, etc. Usually we had hired security, and sometimes local law enforcement will be there to help secure, like Capitol Police obviously are right near the Capitol, so they were there to, secure the perimeter as well. But you would also need to contact people if you need a street blocked off for a larger event or a rally, if you need street blocked off to have a march. So thinking about those things and strategizing that. We also have to say there are some groups who might not be comfortable working with law enforcement. So having a plan to, provide safety, within your own mutual group is also a key thing. And a lot of places, organizations, for example, like Planned Parenthood had hosted a safety training for volunteers to help out and be vigilant. So that's always something that your group could do, or, contact a group who has done safety trainings and get your group involved with that. So that way you can feel safe if you do or don't work with law enforcement locally. So it's also great to have a first aid tent and trained medics, especially at bigger events where there's a lot of people and there might not be, there might be a problem that can occur. So you want to think about that. But you can also get ahead of these problems by thinking, what can we do to prevent this? So of course, with any event, whether it's indoor, outdoor, and no matter what weather conditions, having water is always a key thing, non-negotiable. And I will talk about that later. And, just doing the smart thing and not hosting in excessive heat or cold, or places that aren't accessible, and making sure that it will be safe for everybody there. And then if we have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer that at the end as well. But you can't have an event without people there. So we will talk about how to build for that. So if you could go to the next slide, Ivy. Again, is it public or private? Because that kind of determines where we're going with this event. If it is a more, private event, and you don't want people who could disrupt something. For example, some Zooms are put on private, so that way they don't have a Zoom bomber, is what they call them, who says inappropriate comments and interrupts an important conversation or space. You want to be able to also, again, provide that safety. So having that definitely helps. It's security if it's too intimate, or if it's a storytelling event where people are telling their stories, and people who would not agree with some of those lived experiences might not be good for them to be there if it's gonna make somebody feel very uncomfortable who is being vulnerable and sharing their story in that space, right? We also want to know if it's a public event, though, you want to build for that. And Facebook, social media is a great tool. Word of mouth and relational organizing is great. I'm sure some of you came because you know me. I'm sure some of you came because you saw it on Facebook, right? But other events like a big rally or a town hall might need flyers, because people will see it locally in businesses. So how to go about that? Will you email this event to a bunch of email lists that you're a part of, or ask people who have big email lists and networks to use to email out that event? That's relational organizing, and it really helps to get people to your event because it's usually people who have a lot of things in common with you. Again, if you need to confirm people, like for a volunteer event, calling them again, you usually want to make sure that you can confirm that they're there. You also need to do that for people who are like panelists or speakers who are going to be at your event. So you can make sure that they are there. And if they're not, you have a plan to make sure that you have enough people there, or a speaker covered if someone cannot attend. And so that has to do with flake rate, what we call in the game. So if, for example, if you have like 200 people on Facebook that say they're going, you should assume that probably only 50% are going, because that's what the flake rate is. You just account for people not being able to come. Usually it's about 25 to 50%. And that's large, but it's true. A lot of people fortunately help us amplify events, but end up not being able to come. So it's great that they're able to put on their Facebook that they're going, and then their friends and family see it and that they're able to attend as well. But they might not be able to. And so their friends and family might be able to attend, but now that person can't attend. So that's what's accounting for with that flake rate is, some people will not be able to attend, and you just need to make sure that you're accounting for that with your space as well. But also accounting for what if you need to make sure that if you don't have a flake rate, for example, if a lot of people show up to your rally, that you already plan for having a bigger space than needed, just in case, because you know that those events could be bigger, rather than like a volunteer event. When you're confirming people, usually a rush of folks don't just come in if they hadn't heard about it personally or by word of mouth. So having a smaller space, like just an office space, is usually accommodating for that kind of thing. You also want to have your friends support this work. So have your groups post it to your friend groups, have them share it to their networks to help amplify this. If it's, again, volunteer, you want it to be relational organizing based, have people that you can count on show up if you can do that. And then definitely use your past email lists, your past spreadsheets and sign up sheets to build for bigger events or volunteer events, whether you want people to show up as well. It's very helpful. If you're an organization that use the VAN database, that can also be helpful. But a lot of the times you're going to want to focus on using organic content like email lists, sign up sheets, past Zoom registrations, for example, right? And that'll definitely be helpful. So what does this look like in practice? I want to give you all some examples of what we've done at Progress Iowa, and maybe, some of my past experience with my own political work as well, and what we've done there. So if you can go to the next slide, Ivy, and then actually click, the next one over. So an example is a big rally. What does that look like? Again, I will go back to this July 10th event. I thought it was very well done. Folks built out for at least a minimum of 2 weeks, a little longer, actually, probably, to make sure that that date was set out. People knew about it, was on their calendar, and it was constantly getting pushed and built for. It was going up by hundreds and hundreds every day on Facebook of how many people were going to come. More and more people were signing up for the carpools, etc. So that's a really great indicator that you are planning ahead of time and making sure that it's going to build out. But if it is a rapid response and you don't have as much time to build, like a lot of us do not sometimes in this political realm of things when we're working in this, is there a way that you can determine some of those things ahead of time? So again, for example, Roe v. Wade, it was really up in the air for a while on when it was going to come down. So planning that ahead of time and saying, are these potential dates that we could do, and working as coalitions and organizations together to find that key date that is like, okay, it's going to come down between these weeks, this weekend works better for a lot of people. So we're going to put it on the calendar, and it'll hopefully be timely. It was timely for us. But just see if you can determine that pattern. I'm trying to set that preemptively to help avoid just too rapid a response where it's harder and you have to scramble rather than being prepared, right? And again, a location is going to be rented or reserved. That's a place that you're definitely going to need a permit or permission for. And then you need to make sure that it is confirmed that it's happening. Your bills are paid with that, or you have the invoice, and make sure that it is, ready to go, because that having a big space rented out and needing a big space, you can't just find one on the fly. So having that is important. And then again, for an event like that, confirming speakers ahead of time, interpreters and services like portable bathrooms, a large stage, sound system so people can hear, very, very important to have. And so it's also very important to know that this did not just happen with a couple people on the ground. This was a huge effort from multiple groups that, we're in a coalition together to help bring on a big event from all of their networks together. So working with partners for big events is very key, because you can really turn out a lot of people. And so if we go to the next slide, some of y'all were there, but if you weren't, you can see a picture of just partially, this is just one angle of what it looked like. The stage was all up right by the Capitol building that you can see in the distance. This was definitely from a different part of the ground, but you can see the thousands of people who showed up to that July 10 rally that Planned Parenthood and partners showed up. And this picture was by Gabby Trees with the Daily Iowan. I want to give them credit for taking it. But you can just see, it had so many people there. It had tents set up. There was people and security. It was definitely one of those ones that had accessibility, and it was considered heavily like what kind of arrangements needed, like a sound system, so a lot of people could hear it from very far away. And location and time was definitely determined, as a preemptive, like we don't know when this is going to come down, but we need to set the date. And then we wanted to make sure, obviously, it got out. So having press releases and amplifying it a lot on social media was very key. And so we're going to go to a different example, which would be a smaller, kind of a smaller one, but like a community forum, or a round table of sorts, right? You'll want to build for that 1 or 2 weeks out. Usually those are smaller, so you might not need as much time for that. A location is usually going to be reserved or confirmed in advance for this, especially if you're going to be using a space that's not your own office space. We had this for the Unrig Our Economy project that we work with and partner with. And we used a local pizza restaurant, Basil in Waterloo, wonderful owners, wonderful people who are on board with this message. And so that's also key, is people who are in the fight with you and agree with some of the things that you're working with are going to be are going to try to be accommodable too. So that is very helpful. You want to make sure that that location, like I said, is reserved in advance. You want to confirm your panelists. You want to have a moderator for a roundtable kind of event or a community forum. And you want to make sure that that space fits the attendees. So again, it's accessible, it's able to be found easily, and it has enough seating or space for people to be comfortably there. So if you go to the next picture, you can see you can see an example of, we have our confirmed panelists. We have Ari Redding, we have Rashonda Young, we have Representative Timmy Brown Powers. They all were wonderful and showed up. And we have our wonderful moderator, Sue Dinsdale, sitting at the end there. We had, it was a good space where, unfortunately not pictured, behind there is a really large open space for people, and with multiple tables and multiple chairs for folks to be able to sit. We provided snacks and beverages, and some time to chat as well before the event got started. And so that was a really good example of like a smaller community forum where you invite people from the community to show up, who have been involved with those projects, who care about that work that you're doing, and let them have that opportunity to show up and be a part of the work and the fruition of what you're doing there. And then another example would be a volunteer event. So if you can go to the next slide, these are one of those ones that are usually a little more intimate, depending on what kind of volunteer event you're doing. Usually it's going to be between I'm going to say 5 to 20 people that you're aiming at, depending on what kind of event you're doing. If it's a larger event, usually it's something more politically motivated and electoral work. That would be like canvases or phone banking, where you're going to have a mass amount of people who may never have been involved before. Sometimes at volunteer events, you want seasoned people to be there if you really need to get some work done. But obviously, please open the opportunity up to everybody who'd like to get involved. It's really key to invite maybe a couple people who have been really great volunteers, so they can be like sort of mentors to other people who are new to the group, and can help them figure out what the best way to navigate that work is, and show, be a leading example of like what work can be done and how it can be done. So again, with volunteer events, though, the flake rate, especially for, more electoral work, can be 50%. And you want to account for that. So when you're asking people, if you want 20 people there, make sure that you're asking 40, right? And make sure that you have that set up. Usually folks, for a volunteer event, since you're asking people to do things, you're going to want them to know what they are going to be doing in advance, and give them those details so they know what to expect when they're coming into that space to help you out. And so I will show we'll go to the next slide and I can show a couple of examples of that. We had some wonderful postcard writing events in Cedar Rapids, which was at the bottom, and in Mason City, which is towards the right. And we wrote postcards to keep Ashley Hinson accountable for supporting corporate greed and make sure that she is working for people. And so we got people together and worked with, this is an example of working with local groups. We both reached out to local groups in those communities who already have their feet on the ground and are able to bring people together to these volunteer events and help turn out people to come and volunteer and get involved with this work. So for example, I work with Mason City Voices for Inclusion in Mason City, and they had a great handful of people who already wanted to show up because that group asked them to show up. And so that's a really great way to work with the community connections that you have. And so I want to also talk about the must-haves for these are the bare minimum things, I think. There are definitely more, but if you're trying to keep it to the absolute bare minimum, these are some just very important things to have, whether it's indoor, outdoor events. So if it's indoor and outdoor, always have pen and paper. You never know what you're going to need to write down, what someone else needs to write down for you. Always have water or a place to access water nearby. The same goes for the restroom. If you don't have, so example, if you're hosting a rally in a parking lot, is there a building or a business nearby that has an accessible communal bathroom, or a business that would let people go in and use the restroom without having to be a paying customer? Knowing that is very key. Obviously, we are in the age where we all need charged cell phones. So I think that's an important thing to add, something that sometimes I can even forget and a lot of others. And then you're down to the last minute. You don't want to scramble and then have your phone die on you when you absolutely need it to contact people. So having that, of course, an accessible space, whether that be with ADA accommodations. And if you're not sure what those are, you can always look those up or reach out to groups who know about that and can also inform you. So that'll be very key. And make sure that you have an ask at the end of the event, because we're all here to gather, whether it's a rally, a march, a volunteer event, a town hall. Like, make sure you have an ask, like, why were they there? You need to make sure that this action comes to fruition and has tangible outcomes. So, and then if it's an outdoor, specifically, you always want water, you want a first aid kit. And if it's in the sun, you always have to have sunscreen, because a lot of people like myself are pale and definitely cannot be out in the sun for longer than that amount of time. It's going to be an event in that heat. So those are some non-negotiable bare minimums. And now we're going to talk about, what do we do after we wrap up the event? It all happened. It went well. You got the press there. People came. What do you do next? So we're going to talk about how you want to follow up with your attendees. So, after an event like this, this is online, but even in person too, please send a follow-up and a thank you for folks attending the event or function. Share a call to action within that follow-up, so that way, in case they didn't hear it or see it happening at the event, they can still take action. Make sure that you share contact information to so they can have further involvement at future events with that organization or groups. And then ask for feedback on how it could get better. Always using that in mind helps to improve things, of course, and that's all we want to do is continue to get better. And then give some time for yourself. If that was a lot of work for you to do or for you to put in, because sometimes putting on events can be, emotional labor because we're very passionate about what we're doing. Make some time to give yourself a good nap or eat a good dinner. However, you can do some self-care for yourself, please do that, because you can't keep going and keep hosting events if you can't keep yourself going too. So that's going to be very key. And myself as an organizer, I'd be amiss to say that we don't love a good debriefing. So debriefing that event with the team or other people who help you set it up, volunteers, attendees. Again, that's kind of like feedback as well, but it's a little more of a discussion to figure out how you can tailor and do better for the next event or what to keep the same, etc. So debriefing is really important. And so if you want to host events like this, you might need some support and assistance. So to the next slide we go. All of our contact information is here from our team at Progress Iowa. We have our executive director, Matt, our wonderful press secretary, Catherine, our wonderful messaging director, Katie, who helps with a lot of the wonderful talking points that we use at a lot of our events. Ivy Beckenholt, amazing person who is running, our digital director who is running the Zoom right now. Amy Adams, our awesome partnerships director, who a lot of you probably know. And then hi, I'm Sam. So thank you. If you need any of our information, it will be here, but I will also send this slide deck out. So you will have all of our contact information after this. And this again will also be recorded and put on YouTube. So if you need to get our contact information that way, you will have a way to contact us no matter what. And we are here to help and support these actions that you want to take and have in your community, so we can raise awareness and advocacy and get people involved.